Cape Spear in Newfoundland, the most easterly point of the North American continent. Every summer, icebergs float past the Cape. Many have drifted thousands of kilometers from Greenland in the north. Most melt before they get here. But the number of icebergs off Cape Spear has risen. People say that's due to global warming. This barren landscape is home to Ed Keane, a fifth-generation Newfoundland mariner. He used to fish like his ancestors. Now he catches icebergs and sells the fresh meltwater to breweries.
Depending on the winds and the tides, the icebergs will come up. Will come up in May. Some years there's more than the others, and other years they melt faster. But no 2 years are similar, and this year, 2014, is a good year for icebergs.
Before Ed lets me on his ship, he sends me to a safety training course given by Jim Miller. Jim's an experienced diver and the ship's captain. He'll brief me on the dangers I might encounter on the open sea and show me how to survive in an emergency. Jim takes me on board his sailing yacht. My first test is to put on this survival suit. I have 1 minute.
I'll take the time, and I'll start my time. Okay, go ahead.
The neoprene suit puts up a ferocious defense. Climbing into it is a battle. While I wrestle with the stiff rubber, Jim reminds me that a sinking ship is not a stable platform like this. Right now, that's no help at all.
Nose and stick your head out now. That is 1 minute and 45 seconds.
Oh.
So you fail by 45 seconds, but at least you're in a good suit. But
Jim warns me that reacting correctly, if the engine fails or the weather turns rough, can be a matter of life and death at sea.
Why does Ed want me to do this training?
well, you're going iceberg hunting. Iceberg hunting is dangerous. You're dealing with a small boat and a big piece of ice. In case anything that went wrong, Ed wants to be comfortable to know that you can get on the safety equipment and help rescue yourself.
The next morning, I drive north to Port Union, a small harbor. This is where Captain Ed keeps his ship. The Green Waters is a former fishing trawler that he bought in 2007 and converted. Now Ed and his crew are getting the vessel ready. It'll be the first time they head out this season. It's a perfect day. There's little wind, the ocean calm. Ed looks for icebergs.
Well, we want a piece flat on the water that's probably 2 meters out of the water. Doesn't have legs, like a square piece of ice. We got to put our cables around it and cinch it up tight. We don't like an unstable piece of ice.
Full speed ahead with 850 horsepower. First, Ed wants to locate the icebergs and determine which direction they're drifting. Tomorrow, he'll go out again and start catching them. A few kilometers off the coast, we board the ship's skiff. Ed wants to take a closer look at an iceberg that weighs several thousand tons. The ice is around 20,000 years old. We're literally looking at the tip of the iceberg. Most of the huge lump of ice is submerged.
So it's a bigger part under the water, yeah?
Anywhere from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 times bigger.
We're just a few meters from the iceberg when the motor suddenly stops.
Couple thousand ton. Uh-oh. Don't sound good.
We drift powerless next to the iceberg for what feels like an eternity. It's an uncomfortable feeling knowing this huge chunk of ice could roll over at any minute. The water may look calm, but it's also cold, just 4 degrees Celsius. Finally, we're moving again. Captain Ed is as calm as can be, or at least he looks that way. But I'm relieved to get away from the ice. Incidentally, hunting icebergs is not a problem for the environment. Sooner or later, they'll melt on their own anyway.
We're going out in the harbor.
We set course back to Ed's boat. Suddenly, another problem. Ed discovers a leak. The water is dangerously close to the battery. If it gets wet, it could kill the engine for good. But the engine doesn't quit. Finally, we reached the green waters. Next, I head to Memorial University of Newfoundland to talk to Professor Steve Bruneau. He's made iceberg research his specialty. Bruneau tells me there haven't been so many icebergs off Newfoundland for many years. The icebergs pose a danger to shipping just as they did in 1912, when an iceberg caused one of history's most famous maritime disasters.
Well, of course, we icebergs in their area. And you can see down here, I've just penned in the location of where the Titanic met its fate. And it's certainly inside the zone of icebergs for this season as well.
Bruneau's students are doing research. Here, they're working on an experiment designed to see what happens when steel, aluminum, or concrete strikes an iceberg. Their professor monitors the students' work.
All right. Ready? Yeah.
I'm amazed at how hard the ice is. In this experiment, it resists the huge pressures for 30 seconds. Then it's all over. The next morning, I return to Port Union for the iceberg hunt. Ed heads out in his skiff. He stays close to the coast. This time, he has nets on board.
That one there's a nice piece in it, Phil.
No, Ed doesn't like it. Too small, apparently. We move on. This one's better, though. Ed decides to take it. The net must be wrapped completely around the chunk of ice. Not an easy feat from a small boat. But Ed is experienced. He's been at this since 1997. The green waters edges closer to haul the catch on board.
Here, Jack, haul the line up. Give him the line there. All this one take it out.
Ed climbs up to the mothership for the tricky part. He doesn't like to let anyone else operate the hydraulic crane. Too many things can go wrong. Like this. The line slips unexpectedly.
Shorten that line up now.
Luckily, my skiff is a safe distance away. This time, everything goes smoothly. We set out again. This chunk of ice is too big. I ask myself, how in the world are they going to transport that? The answer is simple. Ed trims it down to size. Ed says this block of ice probably weighs about 3 tons. He guesses it's been drifting from Greenland for the last 3 years.
Already, now tie it on the rail there, look.
The mothership takes the ice in tow. Now it's a race against time, because ice melts quickly when it's being towed.
But that's how much is left out of 3 tons, look.
Okay.
But the mood on board is good. I'm happy that we're back in port and everything went well. The sea has brought the crew a lot of ice this year. Between now and August, Captain Ed and his men hope to sell 2 million liters of iceberg water, 25% more than in 2013. After collecting the meltwater in a tank, Ed sells it to his customers. One of them is this brewery on the outskirts of St. John's. It's one of Ed's main customers. Einar Holtet uses the pricey liquid to produce about 250,000 liters of beer a year. He says beer brewed from iceberg water sells well. Holted invites me to his laboratory, where he tests the quality of the ingredients he uses.
Right here I'm testing for dissolved solids, which is all the minerals and impurities in the water. This water is very pure. This one only has 8 parts per million of dissolved solids, which is very, very clean and pure.
Demand for iceberg beer is so good that the brewery can't make enough. Most of the beer is sold here in Newfoundland, but it's also popular with tourists who like an unusual souvenir from their visit to Canada. In the evening, Ed Keane heads to a pub to celebrate the successful start to this year's iceberg hunting season. It also happens to be his birthday. He won't reveal how much he earns with icebergs. I guess it could be around 100,000 euros. Ed's the only iceberg hunter in this part of Canada. I hear there's another one in Alaska. One thing Ed doesn't have to worry about is supply. Even with global warming, it's going to be a very long time until all the ice on Greenland is gone.